Hello and welcome. I am Lady McTherapist and welcome to my channel. Today I will be doing my first ever edition. So you may be listening to this on a podcast or you may be tuning in to my YouTube channel. Whichever way it is, I am truly so thankful that you have decided to click on this video or podcast and give me a listen. So like I said, I'm Lady McTherapist. I am a licensed professional counselor here in the state of Texas. And I thought for my very first edition, I would bring you one of my absolute favorite topics, and that is, drumroll please, internal family systems. Have you heard of internal family systems? So when most people hear the words internal family systems, they automatically think, this isn't for me. This is a family therapy. I am an individual, and of course we have family issues, but who doesn't? But actually, internal family systems is a model for individuals. And when I first came across internal family systems, it was actually, I listened to a podcast that featured Dr. Richard Schwartz. Dr. Richard Schwartz was the person who founded internal family systems in 1985. So it's been around 40 plus years, which is pretty new for a psychological theory. But IFS posits that we all have a self with a capital S, and that this self is our wise, kind, focused mind, kind of like our conscience or that centered higher mind, and that centered higher mind, our self, can be counted on to give us the wisdom for our particular situations. It's kind of like that internal voice you hear when you may be like spinning out of control and you hear in your mind like, this is not a good direction to go. We should pursue something else. Although some people don't really have that wise center mind accessible very easily. So we have a self with a capital S, but then we also have parts. And if you've ever referred to or seen somebody say like, a part of me really wants to go to this party and another part of me is absolutely dreading it and would prefer to just stay home in my pajamas. That's kind of like a rough explanation of what parts are. We each have different parts, and different parts hold different beliefs. And so parts of us are doing jobs. They're doing jobs, and Dr. Schwartz talks about how there are no bad parts. There may be misunderstood parts, but there are no bad parts. Our parts are trying to do a job to protect us, to help us, to get a result that our parts want for us, although they may be a little misguided in their attempts. In fact, I often kind of say parts are akin to children in the kitchen. They may want to make you a beautiful birthday cake, and the end result may be that they completely burn the kitchen down. They're not trying to be bad, they're not trying to hurt anyone, but they have limited skill sets and oftentimes aren't able to really execute plans and think long term the way that we can. And oftentimes we pick up these parts in childhood or in adulthood during moments of stress and strain. So for instance, I may have a part of me that holds a lot of anger and a part of me that becomes activated if I feel like my loved ones are not supportive of me or encouraging of me. And maybe this part will act out and be angry, fight for me, set boundaries, and maybe in too harsh of a way. And perhaps this part came into being when I was a child. Let's say that I had a caregiver who wasn't supportive of my hopes or my dreams. And so I developed this part that holds the burden of anger to stand up for myself and say, I'm not gonna tolerate that. My boundaries are being violated and I don't like that. So as a child, I wasn't able to access the more adult, long-term thinking, planning mind. So that part of me kind of stepped in and took over to say, you know what? Clearly she can't handle this. So me, this part, anger, I am going to step onto the stage to protect her so that she can make sure that she is not taken advantage of. And so often it's like our parts are trying to do a job. They're trying to accomplish something. And so Dr. Schwartz talks about trailheads. Let's say something happens that triggers or activates a part of you, an anxious part, an angry part, a fearful part, a disgusted part, a happy part. That is called a trailhead. It kind of leads us down the path to explore, why is this part activated? What's going on with the beliefs inside of this part that we can kind of hone in on and get to the root of. But before I go too much further, I should really explain self a little bit better. Now, Dr. Schwartz says that there are 7 C's, not like hi-ho, 7 C's of the world. I don't know how many C's there are, I'm terrible at geography, but he means C like the letter C. And I can never remember all of the C's, but I'll give you the few that I can remember. Self is calm, it's confident, it's compassionate, it's caring. There's other C words, confident, courageous, and the other ones that always slip from my mind. And that's how we can tell that we have self energy. We don't say, are you in self or out of self, but it's like, how much self energy do you have in this moment? Curiosity, that's an important C that I didn't remember, but it's oftentimes the most important C. So you know you have self energy if you can tap into that curiosity, that confidence, that courage, that compassion. And if you're not able to tap into those things, that just means that you are probably what they call blended with the part. And when you blend with the part, that just means that there's a certain part of you and it is doing more of the driving. Your other parts in self might be in the passenger seat or the back seat or maybe even the trunk sometimes, but that part of you happens to be doing the driving, which is not always the best state. Oftentimes our parts really don't, they're not very concerned with like collateral damage like we are. And so they may make choices. I have this experience where like I'll have anger driving or anxiety, and I can kind of hear self in the back being like, don't think this is a very good plan, but it looks like we are rolling with it. Okay. So you may notice when you're blended with a part, you have a difficult time accessing those C's, the calm, the confidence, the courage, the compassion. And when you do have more self-energy, those are more easily accessible. Now, the whole point of IFS is to build a loving collaboration with our parts and unburden them. We don't want to get rid of our parts. I think so oftentimes when I work with clients, that's kind of their first go-to, and I completely understand. They're like, I want to get rid of anger. I want to get rid of anxiety. I never want to deal with that again. But we don't want to get rid of any of the parts because our parts have wisdom, they have strengths, they have talents. We just need to help align them. And I like to think about ourselves as like we are an organization. We are a company, and all of our parts play a particular role. We, the self, needs to be the leader, but we need a financial officer. We need a marketing person. We need a tax professional. We need HR. We need all of these different parts so that they can play their role and function harmoniously. But so often it's like a poorly run organization when there hasn't been a lot of leadership, and maybe the chief financial executive officer is in control, or maybe a part that holds a lot of anxiety is typically in control. And because of that, it's like the whole structure suffers. So as you do your work, you want to build that self-energy and build relationships with the parts. Now, one thing that you learn when you become a therapist, something that's talked about over and over again and has stood like the rigorous testing of time, is that if you want to affect change, one of the most important things you need to do is to build a relationship with the person that you want to affect change with. In fact, they say one of the biggest predictors of successful outcomes or change in therapy is the relationship between the therapist and the client. The therapeutic alliance is what that's called. And so if you have a good relationship with someone, they are more likely to listen to you. When you have something that may be difficult to hear, when you are questioning maybe their reasoning, they're more likely to listen to you if they have faith that you have their best interest at heart, that you believe in them, that you've established a cooperative relationship with them. One way we are never going to affect change is if we have an antagonistic relationship with someone. That's why no fight in the internet, no one's ever said, oh yeah, you changed my mind. You called me a bunch of names and spit a bunch of facts at me and whoa, you changed my mind about my position. No, because when we come at somebody aggressively and antagonistic way, they are just going to entrench themselves in their beliefs and continue on that path even stronger. So what we want to do is we want to have self-develop relationships with these parts. And it is not unlike any other relationship we have when we get to know someone, right? It's like we don't want to just jump in, step on their toes, say, you're not doing this right, you're doing this wrong, you're going to change this, I'm tired of you handling it like that. No. It's almost like you are the new CEO as self and you want to just get to know the organization a little bit better before you jump in and start making demands of everyone. So you might, just for example, have this dialogue with your parts. Let's say that you do feel some anxiety come up. So you might close your eyes, take some deep breaths, feel this anxiety in your body and kind of take stock, like, okay, hi anxiety, here you are. I notice that you are here with me. And check to see how you feel toward that anxiety. If you're mad at that anxiety, if you're frustrated with it, if you don't want it to be there, that tells you that you are not in self energy and likely there is another part in the way, a part that doesn't like the anxious part, a part that wishes the anxious part would, take a break, take a hike. And so we need to address that first. Like, okay, I'm noticing the anxiety. How do I feel towards that anxiety? I feel resentful towards that anxiety. Okay, that tells me there's another part in the way and I need to address that resentful part. Okay, resentful part, why are you resentful of anxiety? Because anxiety is always controlling my behavior. Anxiety makes me not take the chances I want to take. Anxiety makes me sit on the sidelines when I want to participate. And so another key element to forming a collaborative relationship with our parts and with anyone is to validate what they're saying. We don't want to jump in and be like, well, that's a stupid rationale. I don't know why the heck you're thinking that. That's like dumb. No, we want to validate that. So let's say we were taking the resentful part. We'd be like, that makes sense. Anxiety really has caused some issues for me to sit on the sideline and not take life by the horns. You are completely right. You're not out of line by saying that. That actually has happened several times. I see why you would feel resentment towards that anxious part. And when that happens, you begin to feel that resentment soften. It might take a while, right? Maybe it's really stored up some resentment and some frustration and it needs to be validated several times. I like to think about volleying at least 3 times. You volley it back and it's like, yeah, and I'm really sick of that. And you're like, yeah, I know you are. You're really sick of that. And they're like, and you wouldn't believe blah, blah, blah. And you're like, oh man, I know that happened. And again, yeah, and that's why I'm really frustrated with it. Oh, I know you are really frustrated. At least 3 times to really make that other part feel heard and understood. And when you feel that part soften, you can see, am I curious about why anxiety is stepping in? And if you can feel that curiosity, that means that you are in self-energy and can begin to have a dialogue with that anxious part. But it may take a while working with the other parts. Maybe the resentment is like, okay, I'll take a break. I feel better now. And then you're like, well, I'm fearful. I'm fearful of that anxious part because, oh my gosh, it always makes my stomach hurt and then I can't do what I need to do. And then you'd have to work with the fearful part. Oh, I know why you're afraid of anxiety. It really does cause a lot of physical symptoms. And I know that you don't like that, until you can feel that part soften. So what you really want to check with is your curiosity. Are you feeling curious about the part that's in front of you so that you can build that collaboration? So some things you want to know about a part is like, what's your job? So maybe the resentment would say, if I ask what's your part, it's like, what's your role? It's like, I'm here to tell you that we are not letting anxiety take over. My job is to try to fight against anxiety with this feeling of resentment so that you are in a vice grip. And I would say, okay, thank you for doing that job. That job is important. And we want to be appreciative of our parts. Our parts are doing the best they can. They're doing a job for us, and we want to show them gratitude for that. Even if it's not the way that self would go about it, showing that part appreciation for their hard work can go a long way. And so starting with that curiosity, getting to know each part, getting to know the part's job, what they're responsible for, what they do, and then we can begin to form collaborations with the different parts so that we can work together more successfully as a whole. And it is a collaboration between self and the part. So for instance, let's take this anxiety. Maybe the anxiety will tell you that their job is to keep you safe, that you took a lot of risks when you were younger, that you had negative consequences for. Maybe you were lectured, maybe you were yelled at, maybe some really negative, punitive things happened when you did certain things. So the anxiety became this like protector or guardian to make you too scared to do those things that led to the negative consequences. So self can collaborate with that part and say, you know what? That was true, that did happen, but now I am a grown person who can take care of myself, and anxiety, I want to help you so that you don't always have to pull out the stops with anxiety. Let's work together. What do you need from me, anxiety? I just need to know that you're not going to take any unnecessary risks. Okay, I can do that. I can do that. And I need you to let me warn you when something negative is about to happen. Okay, I'm going to listen to your feedback. A technique in IFS is called the boardroom, where you sit down at the head of the seat at the table with all of your parts and you allow certain parts to chime in. And then you kind of hear them just like you would at a boardroom, hear each person's perspective and let self be the leader. Now, an important thing is not only that we do this cognitive work with IFS, but we're also regulating our body, our nervous system. That's really a crucial aspect to being able to demonstrate curiosity. You want to develop some grounding skills so that you can communicate to your body that you are safe, even if your fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode starts to kick in, that you can ground yourself with some deep breathing and tell your body, hey, we are not in physical danger, because that's one thing that our primitive minds do not understand. They really do interpret stress, worry as a physical threat to our safety. And so by taking a very conscious deep breath and practicing that, it's signaling to your fear center or your amygdala in your brain, hey, we're not actually in danger. Nobody stops with a fight for their life to be like, I'm gonna take a deep breath. And doing that signals to your mind like, okay, if we're stopping to take a deep breath, we're literally not fighting for our life. Maybe we're misinterpreting this. Maybe we can slow our roll a little bit. And that's something that we need to practice, not when we're in a state of anxiety, but we need to practice all the time. It's just like when you were in school where you did drills, you didn't just wait for the fire to happen and then do the drill, because there's going to be panic and melee and you don't know what you're doing because you're not in your wise, calm mind when something scary happens. So it's like we want to practice those deep centering breaths when we're not upset and when we're not scared. So we develop that practice of being able to center and to ground ourselves. And it takes time, right? You know, the first few times, the first hundreds of times you do it, it's like, yeah, whatever. But eventually that grounding breath becomes an anchor for you. And when you take those deep centering breaths, it's like, here I am. I'm back home. I'm welcoming my energy in. I'm feeling more centered. But it takes practice. We've had plenty of practice. Most of us have feeling anxiety and having our anxiety ramp up. But oftentimes we have not practiced what it's like to feel safe and connected and grounded inside of our bodies. And so demonstrating that ability through taking those deep breaths, demonstrating curiosity, taking some time to close your eyes, check in with yourself to see what parts have been activated this week. What kind of jobs are they playing? How can I thank them and collaborate with them so that we can become a more integrated whole instead of disjointed selves, disjointed parts with the self underneath the surface? One last thing I'll mention is polarizations. I'm sure so many of you have felt polarizations. I know I have, and that is when parts hold opposite views. Like, a part of me really wants to work out and a part of me absolutely refuses to work out, and therefore I'm paralyzed. I can't get to the bottom of doing it or not doing it, or I'll do it for a while and I completely stop doing it because those parts are polarized. And so often to help that polarization is just the curiosity, getting to know what each part wants, what job it's doing, and then finding some sort of compromise that everyone can agree on moving forward. Now, having parts is not pathology. I think so often that people think like, wow, if I have different parts, does that mean I'm crazy? Does that mean I have dissociative identity disorder? And no, that is not the case. Dissociative identity disorder is different, and one very main aspect is that the person who's experiencing that is not aware that they have different parts. They have missing time. They'll be like, I just came to and I have a bunch of new clothes in my closet and I'm wearing a different outfit and my dishes are done and I don't remember doing the dishes. So with DID, there's distinct parts that do not know about each other and that aren't in connection, and even the person's self is really not aware of these distinct parts and when they're moving through these parts. So it's very natural for us to have parts, for us to have these different beliefs and different burdens that we have picked up over the years that are serving a purpose to protect us, to help us negotiate life, and if we can become more centered and more integrated and more self-led, as IFS says, the easier and more fluid our life will be. So in this podcast, I intend to talk about internal family systems, which I'm trained in, or different modalities, different diagnoses, as we go along, communication skills, conflict resolution, many other strategies for our mental health to improve it overall. I'm just starting with internal family systems because I am an internal family system therapist, but I am also versed in many other things as well, many other interesting topics. So I hope that you will click subscribe or follow along and continue with this journey. And I truly do appreciate your time, and I look forward to having more of these discussions.